so years, and more aggressively the last for so years, and more aggressively. Well, the reason I agree, and something I think that we will all three agree on is that we are more politically divided than I've ever seen in my lifetime. I suspect that we all agree on that. Yes, no?
I would agree.
So, Jeff, I'm going to send this to you.
Mhm.
What do you think are the reasons for such large political divisions at this point?
In all honesty, it's because we really don't have an engaged republic. People have checked out, and so they've checked out of doing their own, looking for their own answers, teasing out the political issues, seeing it from both sides, and coming up with a decision that they've informed themselves on. People are checked out from it. There's no longer this engaged, in my opinion, this engaged citizenship. And so it's easier to align yourself with a team. So if you are, like we talked about, if you are that 25-year-old kid that's raised by a quote unquote, right conservative family, you're going to align yourself into that group because you're not doing a civic duty of understanding how it all works. Most people in America, if you asked them why there's 9 judges, they wouldn't know. You know what I mean? So they're no longer engaged in this concept of my vote matters, and so therefore I'm going to understand the issue of what I'm voting on. And so then you enter in 24-hour news cycles, social media, the cell phone, and it's all about creating division. And so all that does is that what you see in front of you are the things that you've been taught to dislike and the things that you've been taught to like. And so you constantly either get confirmation bias on things that you hate or things that you like, and you drive yourself into your camp without any engagement, without any research, without any discernment of your vote. And I think we've seen that more and more. I think it's a shame that it's going that way, but I do believe that's why there's such a huge political divide, because we have media companies picking a topic, whether that is protests or Donald Trump, whether that is reparations or, like Rome was saying, white privilege, right? And so without actually having a discussion, a thoughtful discussion, we don't have medium that people are latching onto for those discussions. They check out and they go, well, I like that guy because that's just who I've been listening to. And there's no substance to the reason on why they are in that camp, other than that's what they know, and so that's what they've aligned with. So to be honest with you, I'm disappointed with the populace. I'm disappointed with the American public on this lack of personal accountability and responsibility in their civic duty. So,
Rome, why would you say, or what reasons do you think are the causes of such severe political divisions?
It's a pretty clear-cut answer. But I don't want to take too long to explain it. So I'll try to be brief as I can.
We want to hear what you have to say, man. So say it. Listen, you're amongst friends, and this is not about like attacking each other, or all three of us know that we mean well, and our goal is to kind of understand versus arguing. So speak freely, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just get long-winded, so that was more of a check on myself not to get too long-winded, because you have an idea where I'm coming
That's
from.
That's all right. If you get long, I'm gonna send the Sandman out
with the hook. Yep. This country should never ever again elect someone of the likes of Donald Trump. All right. Now, he was not the single reason for all of the disruptiveness that we experienced when he came into office up until when he was sent home after one term. But we should never, ever again allow this country to sink to that depth of functioning, because we didn't have a government for a few years. And I think we're so divided because there's the truth, there's reality, and then there's Trumpism. Okay. And I have no tolerance or patience for anybody that supports Trumpism, because I don't think it's healthy for anyone to be in a constant state of perpetual denial about what's real and about what's really going on, and to have no personal accountability whatsoever. It sends a bad message to those who quite frequently get a raw deal, because when some people in society commit a crime or do wrong, they get punished for that and they're held accountable for it. And so when someone has the power of the office, the bully pulpit, to stir up and gin up his supporters to such a degree that all he has to do is keep repeating a lie, no matter how obviously blatantly untrue it is, you tell a lie enough times, people will start to believe it. Okay. The big story of the week of January 6th, that wasn't even supposed to be the main story of that week, when the Capitol got stormed during the certification of the election, certify that Joe Biden had won. Mind you, after several courts tossed out their challenges to the election results. Mind you, after all 50 states had certified the election. Mind you, after Republican legislators at the state level told him that you lost, bruh, go home, pack up, go home. Okay, and he's still out there with people like Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell, that cracking knucklehead, acting like he didn't lose, acting like he didn't get his butt handed to him. Okay, we don't have time to play with that kind of childish level of politics ever again. And we should never tolerate that. And we should never play with them. And we should never pretend like they have a legitimate argument to make if they're going to allow themselves to be led and influenced by a cult figure like Trump. We should never stoop to that level again, because it is very divisive and it serves no greater good that this country has.
So my question to that, Rome, is Trump the reason for the divide, or is he a symptom of, of where this country has kind of become over the last 20, 30 years?
Yeah, he's a symptom, because the root cause of it is there's a shrinking minority of his voters, and they know it. They know that there's a diminishing voting bloc consisting of, cisgender, heterosexual white men who believe in everything that he says, no matter what he says. It doesn't have to be true. And so, no, he's not the cause of it, but it's been something that's been fermenting for a long time. And he sort of galvanized that entire movement to such an extent that he captured the zeitgeist of what white fear really is. This fear that the others are coming, they're going to take from us, they're going to replace us. And putting him in office sort of put that narrative on steroids. And so again, if you repeat the lie enough and you hire suck-ups and sycophants like Louis DeJoy to tamper with elections and tamper with mail, and you got Stephen Miller and you got Bannon and you got all these characters around, we have to be careful not to ever allow that to happen again. Now, I hear what you're saying when you said a moment ago that there's been a level of disappointment that you've experienced with the politics, Jeff. I'm actually proud of what the country did to stand up to that, because it needed to be backed down, and they need to know unequivocally that we're much better than that, and we're much more numerous than them. Do you really think he got 74 million votes? Hell no, he didn't.
Well, no, that wasn't the question. I mean,
no. I digress. Always.
Yeah.
Sandman's coming. Sandman is coming.
Yeah, no. I mean, the question was what was about the divide, and I'm not here to say that Trump was healthy for the country at all. I'm not going to take that stance, and nor would I ever. My point is that there was a lot of things going on worldwide. I mean, look what's happening in Brexit. In Great Britain. I mean, there is this underbelly of unhappiness with government influence. And so I think that I agree that Trump is a symptom of what's going on in not only in our country, but worldwide. Listen, I was proud, to be honest. I was proud. I didn't vote for Obama, but I'm proud that the country was able to vote the first black man into the office. I don't think that, like you were saying, that it's this major white lash against Obama and the country, and that's why you elect Trump. I think that might have some influence, but you got to remember, greater than half the country voted Obama in. So where are all those white voters? You know what I mean? So when you say it's this white lash, I have trouble with that because the majority of white voters voted for Obama.
Okay.
So, I didn't say white lash.
So,
well, I'll say it. I mean,
and so my thing is that I thought you kind of insinuated that, but
I thought he did.
I agree that there was a opportunity for the country to make a change after Trump. Now, I'm not happy with the guy that they put in there, but I'm happy there was a change.
Well, Ashley Babbitt is an example of, she voted for Obama twice reportedly, and she was one of the people that stormed the Capitol, and she took a bullet to the neck and gave her life to go and contest the election. And so I'm curious because Steve agreed with you. What was in what I said that made it imply that that I felt it was a white lash?
Because you kind of said it. You said that his voters, there was a shrinking minority of his voters, and they're kind of freaking out about it.
Well,
right?
You specifically used the word white too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but white lash meaning, I think that's where the sense that they're losing control, they're losing their grip on power. Well, so he sort of galvanized that. He wasn't the only character in they could have voted for John Kasich and got those things. They could have voted for freaking Marco Rubio or Lindsey Graham while he was in the race. What was it about Donald that so galvanized the base so much? There was something else about what he brought to the table that was a lot more poignant, a lot more virulent, and a lot more direct to the soul and the spirit of where they were coming from. They feel like there's things being taken from them.
Well, sounds like you mean white lash to me.
Well, how do you?
Well, if I meant white lash, I would say it. But I'm just.
Well, I agree. I think.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's the reason why he is so revered even to this day. You see, they can't let him go. He's still creeping back up on Twitter, even though he's been back.
He's losing influence. I mean, I think
I would like to think so.
I think he's losing influence. But I've had this discussion with Steve in the past. Is that I hear what you're saying, but how do you reconcile then that in certain areas of the country that Trump in the first election, right? In the first. What's that? In 2016, his first election, how do you reconcile that he got more African American vote, more Hispanic American vote than any other Republican really in history? How do you reconcile that? And then if that's the case, if those voters didn't abandon him in the 2020 election or did, where does the white lash come in when you're winning that amount of votes and flipping counties that have never gone Republican in some of these states?
All right, that's a good question. Where he flipped them was in what used to be called the Rust Belt, which has been traditionally a competitive voting bloc for both Democrats and Republicans. The Rust Belt consisting of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota's not the third one, but the third one slips my mind at the moment. But it's those three in the Rust Belt. Pennsylvania is the other one. And so he did get a percentage of the African American vote, and it did increase with this most recent election. But that only was a factor because the general populace stepped up their voting numbers. And so everybody got a bounce because of that. Now, people are people. And this is why I don't put too much on the fact that, yeah, he had black men that voted for him, largely more so than black women. But by far, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but it's not even close. The people that voted against Donald Trump the most, and it's not close, is African Americans. So that's African American men and women. We resoundingly reject him more than anybody in this country. And so black voters have long been considered the conscience of this country. And once again, they had to step up, particularly in Georgia, to save this country from itself once again. And that's how they were able to flip the Senate with Ossoff and Warnock.
So can I'd like to jump in here, gentlemen. So I agree with both of you and disagree with both of you on certain things.
How is that possible?
Right. The first thing is I think Rome was a little soft on, I think that it's absolutely Trump's or the division. And it gets a little complicated, right? But the divisions, in my opinion, are chiefly related to, quote unquote, I've never used this term before, but since it was brought up, white lash. And now
again, I wasn't the one that brought up white lash.
Right. But the fact that I think the biggest reason why Trump was the guy over all those 16 other guys was a concern about the changing demographics of the country and a desperation that it is inevitable that the demographics are going to continue to change. And I think that creates fear. Now, what I'm going to say might shock some people. I think that's okay to admit that. I've talked to people that have admitted that to me. They thought that Obama wasn't for white people. I've talked to people who've said that. And I appreciate them being honest. They wouldn't say it in public for sure, but it's clear to me that, and I didn't see it, to be honest. And that's what freaked me out about Trump being elected. I didn't realize how much vitriol there was towards Obama. And I still don't understand it to this day, because he's like the most exemplary example of the American dream. Like, how can you have this kind of disrespect and distrust for a person who, number one, he was politics as usual. I'm not talking about his politics at all. I'm talking about the man who came out of a broken home, parents from different lands, went to junior college, worked his way up, and became the head of the law review at Harvard, and ended up becoming president with a name like Barack Obama.
Come on.
Like that, to me, that guy, just based on that, should be revered by everybody. 100%. Aside from politics. Now, his politics were no different than the politics as usual. As a political entity, I think that he did some things that were healthy for the nation, but I don't think he necessarily moved the needle from normal, terrible American politics as usual. But what came out of that was vitriol, the likes of which we've never seen, towards a president for no reason, in my estimation. And it wasn't political, right? Because he got us out of, if people wanted to admit it, he got us out of the worst economic downturn since the Great Recession and Depression after George Bush. Not saying that makes him God, but the point is that if the economics were the issue, then he turned it around in a way that nobody else has ever done. But my point is that I think it's okay for white people to admit, or so-called white people, because I don't believe in the concept of race, and we'll get to that another time. But so-called white people, it's okay for them to be concerned. I mean, people that I know closely that call themselves white are concerned about the changing demographic. And there is some currency in being called white still today in America. There just is. There is a certain power. There's some currency in it. And I think people don't want to give that up. But on top of that, there are increasingly leftward issues that are freaking people out. I think that's secondary to the white lash, quote unquote. But there are issues with respect to the left moving further left, like when you can't call somebody, when you change gender, right, and you aren't able to say man and woman, and you've got that scares people, right? When you're allowed to have a transgendered person go in any bathroom they want and decided on that day if they want to call themselves male or female, that scares people. The border, right? That to me, that's probably the central issue in Trump being elected. And people have been told to be concerned about the border in ways that are unrealistic, but yet and still they're concerned about the immigration, illegal immigration from the border, which is adding to the changing of the demographics. And then there's the unwillingness for people, like Jeff was saying, to take ownership and understanding what's really going on in their country, and being willing to just accept whatever everybody else is saying on TV. So in my opinion, those are the major factors. And if somebody wants to comment, go ahead.
I do, but I'll wait for Jeff.
Oh, well said. I mean, I don't have any. You just made a statement. So, okay. I hear you.
You agree, disagree?
No, I mean, I think you make a good point. I mean, for me, I mean, it's, you know, I come from a different perspective. You know, my wife is Mexican, first generation. Her family, her parents don't speak English. All of her brothers and sisters are first generation. Actually, you know, two of her brothers were born in Mexico, and, you know, came here in a legal way. And so the extension of my circle, and is interesting on how you handle immigration. I mean, I don't know if we're moving into immigration or not, if that's the segue, but I think it's a very complex, very, very complex issue. Mm-hmm. But you better believe that it is a political football. It is not for the well-being of the people coming across. It's not for the well-being of the country. It is a political football to change the electorate, whether that's good or bad, right? Whether that's healthy or unhealthy, it is a direct political play, particularly in California. And so for me, I despise the fact that there isn't a real discussion at all for the last 40 years about immigration. And here we are, 2021, still talking about the same thing that they talked in 79, and there hasn't been any real change. Not from President Obama, not from Trump, not from Reagan, not from nothing other than amnesty granted in 87 or whatever it was. So, you know, again, I think our worldview is based on our experience, and my experience with my extended family and my friends that are Hispanic, overwhelmingly do not support illegal immigration. Do not support it. So, but they don't have solutions either. You know what I mean? So they get into that camp, you know, and it's a very interesting dynamic that happens in that arena when you have, you know, people of the same race having discourse about what you're supposed to do with that group coming in. It's great to sit back and watch, but overwhelmingly, they are opposed to the way the immigration system is set up now.
What do you think the discussion should center around?
Well, I think that it's such a broad topic that a lot of the countries that they're fleeing are doing a disservice to their own citizens. And so how is it that we as a nation of wealth and of resources are not trying to use our influence with our neighbors to the south, like we use in Israel, to help those nations build so that their citizens aren't trying to flee, whether they're trying to flee violence or poverty or oppression. How are we not having that in one of the prongs of the multi-pronged approach about immigration. I mean, overwhelmingly, we're seeing immigration from South America and from Mexico to flee their circumstance. Why is that? And how is it that the U.S. doesn't take a position to influence those countries rather than no, you can't come, or yes, you can come? And that's the political position. It's so much deeper than that. Those people are leaving for a reason. And we certainly are not doing a good job of processing them and either integrating them into society or sending them back to their own societies. We don't do a good job of it. And what we do is we allow it to fester, and then it becomes the 5-minute discussion piece on CNN. And now we got the two camps.
Mm-hmm. Do you speak Spanish now?
I understand it very well.
Okay. That makes sense.
Certainly getting yelled at and cussed at. But I don't speak it well enough to feel comfortable.
I hear you.
But certainly understand it well.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you said, because the receptive language is definitely the one that developed faster rather than the expressive language. So that makes a lot of sense. My receptive language around Spanish is better, compared to me trying to speak it. But I asked you that because when I wasn't aware of your marital makeup of your family, and given that you've had exposure to people from that region who are real people, families. And when Steve, you were talking about the transgender issue and how incendiary that issue can be, because people genuinely get vexed when they consider the notion that they got to share a bathroom with someone that doesn't share the issue consistent with their origin of birth, their genital assignment, or whatever that terminology is. And it does get people riled up. And part of what begins to neutralize that, and I'm not saying that I'm good at it, but I do have some friends who are lesbians, and I do have some friends who don't talk to me about those issues. But I know that if I had the opportunity to have engagement, I probably would understand it better. But in many aspects, Steve, I agree with you. It's like, and you and I may have even spoken about it at some point before, the idea of a track athlete having to compete, a female track athlete having to compete against a transgender athlete who was born male, that doesn't feel right.
It's a problem.
Yeah, that's a problem. And so I don't think that we have to be careful around that. And the other issue, and I'm kind of all over the place because I kind of want to address what both of you were saying, but around immigration in particular, it has wreaked a particular cost on the Black community in terms of when the labor pool expands and employers have an opportunity to capitalize on a labor force that's not, at a higher cost. It puts the indigenous labor workers at a significant disadvantage. And so without the benefit of having that second language fluency, or without having the people represented in these companies that can make hiring decisions, African Americans in particular, I'm just speaking about African Americans right now, have been in a really precarious position. And I was in that position in that I couldn't find any work in Southern California. That's why I had to leave. And oftentimes it wasn't directly said, but when I would go to these interviews and I would see the makeup of the gender and the panel, I knew what was up. And I knew I was at a significant disadvantage. And no, of course, they're not going to say that that was the reason why they didn't select me. But it's hard not to understand that you're dealing with something where there's a phenomenon where there's a certain coddling, more so in Southern California versus Northern California in terms of the issue of immigration. And up in Northern California, I know that there's a supreme difference, because I'm like, how is it that I can get an offer from a district that's 98% Hispanic? They know I don't speak Spanish, but just from a phone conversation, they want to hire me from Los Angeles. What's the difference between up here versus down there? And I had to ask around. It's like, it's just the whole coddling around. Up here, they make sure you speak English. There's an emphasis around that piece primarily, more so than Southern California. It's less coddling, and it creates a vacuum of people that are going to have to make some decisions about their residency where they are. Now, let me wrap up before the Sandman comes, because I feel you coming, Stephen Mack. I feel you coming, Stephen Mack. But getting back to what Jeff said about immigration and the roots of the issue, if we had politicians that would address the root of the issue, go to the source, because people have been criticizing Kamala Harris for not going to the border as if she hasn't ever been there before. My question is, well, what do you want her to do when she gets there? I mean, it's you want her to take pictures and do photo ops like the previous administration has done? Or do you want people to really roll up their sleeves and get something done?
Well, that's the thing.
She's in Guatemala with President Giamatti, and she's been working on those root causes that you're talking about. They're fleeing because they had a hurricane. They're fleeing because they don't have economic and they don't have economic security, and they have food insecurities. And people feel like AOC and people that are in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, they feel like the United States has played a supreme role in disenfranchising these other countries. And so that's why they're fleeing. And while it's legal to seek legal asylum here, we have not been consistent in our messaging about being welcoming versus, pursuing legal paths to citizenship here. And so I agree with Jeff that there's definitely some work to be done around that. But keep in mind, Paul Ryan, the outgoing Speaker of the House years ago, he opened the door before he stepped down and left Congress, and he opened the door for Irish immigrants to come into this country. Why did he do that? There's a reason for that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that he did that. That's the first I've heard of that. But he opened the door, meaning they can come, they get citizenship, they're here illegally.
He created a pathway so that they could use a different visa to come in and extend their stay. Now, Democrats are not for open borders. The left is not for open borders. We are not for illegal immigration. And I have yet to find a quote that says, or that is quoted one Democrat saying, I am for open borders, because it was a Democratic president that deported more illegal immigrants than any president, left or right. And that was Barack Obama. And so, no, on the left, they're not for open borders. In many instances, it seems that conservatives, in some instances, not all, they seem to value immigration illegally more so than they do on the left, because it means cheap labor for them. And until the employers are held accountable, no disrespect to you, Jeff, because I'm not saying this is you, but until employers are disincentivized from hiring cheap labor, despite their citizenship status, I mean, this problem is going to continue, but they benefit from it. And they can hypocritically go on TV and say, hey, the left is all for open borders. They're not. But your hiring practices demonstrate that you are. So when are we going to start dealing with that? My 2 cents.
Well, I think it goes deeper than that when it comes to employment. I mean, especially in California, I mean, you're prohibited from challenging somebody's immigration status. So even if somebody was illegal, you could not challenge them, right? Mm-hmm. By law. So you're not allowed to ask certain questions. And so I agree with you that the labor force in our communities is definitely hit hard by cheaper, under the table labor, for sure. And business owners that have cheap labor available are certainly going to use the cheapest labor possible, because that's the very definition of their business, right? Is to maintain profit margins. So certainly I believe that it's had an adverse effect, not just on white, or not just on black, but on white communities and Asian communities, sure, and other Hispanic communities, right? Sure. And so that's why I think you see, or I see rather, in the Hispanic community that have done things maybe a little bit differently, have kind of an aversion, to illegal immigration, because, I mean, like it or not, people want to keep what they got. Steve says that all the time. So if you're here and you feel like your job is being taken by someone else, there's a level of fear there for sure.
Oh, most definitely. And what never gets talked about is the most dominant group coming in right now is not Hispanics, it's Asians. But we don't hear very much about that. That's the most dominant immigrant group coming in right now. But the media again picks its boogeymen based upon, convention and tradition, and people tend to go with it. But we have
certainly their boogeyman on the states that they think they can flip: Arizona, Texas, Nevada, where they're hit hard by illegal immigration. So both of them take a political stance and take it hard. And what do you see? You see votes change based on that political stance without discussion. Without discussion.
Well, what about Texas? I mean, to your point, I mean, I agree with you. Because it was the Tejano vote in Texas that maintained Texas for Trump, because they did identify so strongly with him. They're like, hey, he's one of us. We are him. Same thing with the Cubans in Florida. They love Donald Trump. And so because people don't appreciate the variety and the diversity in the Hispanic voting bloc, and you can't just send out pamphlets in Spanish. I mean, you got to cater to the Tejanos, the Cubans, the Venezuelans, the Guatemalans, the Peruvians, the Ecuadorians, the El Salvadorians, and they all have their respective interests that have to be catered to. Democrats got to get better at messaging to reach them as well as conservatives, because if both parties don't work on actively expanding their voting base, it's going to be tough for both parties. Now, I will say, I mean, right now, the weapon on the right is suppressing votes. Stacey Abrams is out there getting it done and registering voters. So I don't see that hustle on the right. I'm not saying it's not out there, but I'm not seeing it. But in many ways, they don't have to hustle that hard, because their politics is suppression. So they got the levers of government that's actively at the legislative level, actively trying to impact the way people vote and the way they have access to voting. And so people are on the ground on the left. So if the conservatives are going to keep up and they're not going to want to complain about, electoral outcomes that they don't like, this sister's about to out hustle them again.
For so years, and more aggressively the last. Well, the reason